My name is Emma Neve, and I'm an 8th grade English teacher at John F. Kennedy Middle School. And I'm really fortunate that the Suffolk Education Foundation fully funded my grant for this school year for Scholastic Scope magazines. Scholastic Scope is a magazine for the classroom for middle school age students that uses interesting articles for students to teach a variety of English language arts skills. I was really hesitant when SEF asked me to apply for this again because none of us knew at that point what this school year was going to look like. But I did it anyway because my students love these magazines. And so we've been really fortunate this school year to still be able to use these because everything that is in these physical magazines is accessible online. And so we've still been able to read paired passages and flash fiction and short stories and poems. And furthermore, Scope has really stepped up their game when it comes to providing for teachers. For every piece of text that is in these magazines, they provide pre-made activities that all teachers have to do is just add them to their Google Drive and make whatever adjustments they need before assigning them to students. And we all know that our workload has increased dramatically this school year. And it has really been such a relief to just, all I have to do is pick the story or the article that I want to read and make the adjustments to match our standards of learning and assign it to students. And my kids have loved it. We have gotten to do some really cool activities. We have read about the stinky history of hygiene, which has been great. We have been scared senseless by the suspense of a scary short story. And we have even flexed our acting muscles by performing a few plays online. And all the while we're having this fun, my kids are learning and reinforcing really crucial reading and writing skills. And so I'm incredibly grateful to the Suffolk Education Foundation for funding my grant. And I definitely encourage any of my colleagues here in Suffolk, if there is a project that you really want to do in your virtual or your physical classroom, apply for it because you never know how it could pan out for both you and your students.
Hello, my name is Sarah McDonald, and I am the instructor for the Biomedical Sciences program. I'm very fortunate to work here in Suffolk Public Schools in this STEM program. STEM education, particularly for the Biomedical Sciences program, allows students to apply their knowledge in a practical way to gain experience in biological science practices, but also activates their mind and opens doors to their future. With these STEM activities comes the need for consumable lab supplies that are necessary and sometimes requires extra funding. I have been very privileged to be funded by the Suffolk Education Foundation since 2015. The SEF grants have supplied critical equipment, making lab activities possible for the students in the biomedical program. The Suffolk Education Foundation has provided over $10,000 in equipment and supplies to the biomedical program. These supplies have enhanced student engagement and helped students in the biomedical program engage in lab practices that build their understanding and give them the experience needed when they leave the program and enter the real world. Suffolk Education Foundation's grants have funded projects that include genetic research, such as recombinant DNA, designing prosthetics. They have given us 3D printers, exploration in biotech research, which includes cancer research, environmental studies, and the effects of toxic substances in the environment. This year, currently, we are trying to explore behavioral research. All this is possible through the funding of the SEF grant. I greatly appreciate all the support from the Suffolk Education Foundation, and I thank you, and I know my students appreciate and thank you also.
Newport News Shipbuilding. We're building on an American legacy of quality, pride, and excellence, where craftsmen and women build the most technologically advanced submarines and aircraft carriers in the world for the United States Navy. Newport News Shipbuilding, celebrating 135 years of always good ships.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Welcome to an inaugural webinar series of Can We Talk? Tonight is combating the COVID-15, and we're very excited to have our presenters here with us tonight. Bear with me just a second here as I get caught up. I thought I had the right screens up, but you know, best laid plans, right? So here we go. All right. So we're very excited to have with us our two presenters. Christine Troutner is a clinical dietitian and nutritionist with Optima Health. She earned her dietetics certification, that's a mouthful, with an emphasis in whole foods nutrition and integrative medicine at Bastyr University, and a dual Master's of Science degrees in Nutritional Sciences and Exercise Physiology from San Diego State University. As a member of the Health and Preventive Services team, Christina provides diet and lifestyle guidance for the prevention of chronic disease to members and the community at large. Danny Hill is a health educator with Optima Health. She earned her bachelor's degree from Virginia Tech in nutrition and exercise and her master's degree from the University of Alabama in public health program promotion and development. As a member of the Health and Preventive Services team, Danny works on developing visual education for members and the community at large. So, I've got to thank a couple people before we get started. We're very excited about doing these webinar series. We're hoping we're answering a need for the community, as we did with the teacher supply store, the cyber kits, which we issued at the beginning of the year, and as we've done for many years with our instructional grants and our scholarships. Both those applications are open on our website at suffolkeducationfoundation.org. We also are only able to make this possible through our support from the community and from our sponsorships. As always, you can donate to the Suffolk Education Foundation at our website at suffolkeducationfoundation.org. And it's through the support of the community that we're able to accomplish these initiatives. We want to thank our many sponsors, especially our annual sponsor, RRMM Architects and its partners, and our presenting sponsor for this series, Newport News Shipbuildings. This webinar is also made possible in part from a grant from the Overseas Healthcare Foundation. So with that being said, let me go ahead and turn the controls over to Danny here.
All right.
And it is all yours.
Okay. Get the right screen up here. Oh, that's not the right one. Let me switch it. I don't want to see all the. There we go. Bear with it for just a second. There we go. Hi again, my name is Danny. So happy to be here with the Suffolk Education Foundation and all of y'all tonight. Tonight, Christina and I are going to go through a little bit of the aspect of the pandemic that I'm sure we're all so familiar with, and that's just the change to our lifestyle habits, whether that be diet and now working 10 or 15 feet away from your refrigerator, or not being able to go and do as much as we've been accustomed to in our lifestyles, and so that maybe has made us a little bit more of a couch potato. So we're going to go through a little bit of that information. What I'm going to do is, while presenting, I'm going to take my camera down just to avoid the distraction, and hopefully you can get all your eyes and ears onto what's coming through your audio and coming up on your screen in the PowerPoint. And then as you have questions when we finish each section, certainly we'll bring my camera back up so that we can talk through those. And Christina and I will pass the ball back and forth a little bit during the course of the presentation. So I am going to hide myself for just a second. Okay, so to get started, I wanted to just again go through a little bit of the nuts and bolts of what we're going to talk about tonight. Obviously recognizing that the pandemic has had a big impact on not just our physical health, but all aspects of our health. We'll discuss a little bit about well-being. And before we go into each of these sections, I believe that Beth Ann had a poll. Beth Ann, do you still have that poll question available that we could pose while we're talking about these? Thank you so much. They should be up on your screen now. And we're just kind of curious, how has the pandemic impacted some of the aspects of your well-being? And it doesn't matter if it's impacted it in a positive way or a negative way, but I'll go ahead and let you answer that if you don't mind. And the goal of the presentation tonight is to talk through some of this stuff, some of the aspects of the pandemic's impact on, again, your well-being, but also your physical activity, your diet, and your motivation towards those aspects of your health. All right. And then Beth Ann, when you're ready, perfect. Okay. So looks like physical activity took the lead, but certainly overall well-being has been impacted, and motivation, I know that I can speak to that one myself. And diet looks like We didn't get a response on diet one way or the other. And maybe that's just because we all know, whoo, that's gone by the wayside, but hopefully not. So we'll address it both directions so that we can see how we might be able to get some information into your hands. And then I think we did have another poll question. Beth Ann, if you could put that one up for us. Okay, and this one is around your resources. So based off of how you answered that first question, whether it was your total well-being, your physical activity, your diet, or your motivation, do you feel like you've got some good resources to help you in those areas if you need help? All right, so we've got some that are saying, yeah, I've got some good stuff available to me. And then the majority of us, I do, but they could be better. So hopefully we can address that for the majority of you. That's great. Thank you so much, Beth Ann, for that. So now we kind of get an idea of where everyone is. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into a little bit of well-being. So what exactly is well-being? If you were to look it up on, I was going to say online, but even in the dictionary, the old school dictionary, you would probably find a definition that said to be in a state of feeling happy, feeling healthy, or feeling prosperous. And that's definitely a global statement for any aspect of your life. What we've done with Optima Health and our team when we talk about well-being is put this concept into a graphic to better understand it. And this is what we like to use. It's called our well-being wheel. The wheel is intended to show you that there are interconnected portions of your life that are going to impact your overall health. Why is that? Well, we have different bodies, we have different minds, living situations, certainly different people influencing our lives, and all of those are going to impact our health in a direct way. We all have a unique picture of what health and well-being is. And so while they're specific to each person, we know that these typically fall into buckets. And the buckets that Optima Health recognizes is our physical well-being, our emotional well-being, our social well-being, and our financial well-being. So the well-being wheel kind of helps to explain this concept. Think of it similarly to how you would think of a wheel on a bike or a car. You're not able to move forward or change direction on a flat tire, just as you can't really achieve your best health by focusing on only one area of this wheel. You need all four to be balanced to make the wheel move forward. What we know about the pandemic, research has already started to examine the extent to which it's impacted our overall well-being, So we are going to certainly put the focus of our attention on the physical portion of this wheel, but know that we are going to try to touch on a little bit of each of the other three. And I think you've got some really great presenters coming up in the next several weeks that are going to touch on all of these. So that's great. All right, so let's go ahead. Now we've kind of got an understanding of well-being. Let's talk a little bit about prolonged sitting. So I don't know about y'all. I have an office job. I am still working from home. My office job required me to sit at the desk the majority of the day. It still requires me to sit at my desk to get the majority of my work done. And so to understand kind of prolonged sitting with that kind of setting in your mind, we have to first understand what sedentary behavior is. Sedentary behavior has received a lot of increased attention in the public health realm, and that's because it's showing to be a big problem in terms of how much it impacts our health risks. And it's certainly highly prevalent among the US population. It's basically defined as any waking behavior that's characterized by a low level of energy expenditure. So things like sitting, reclining, lying down, but really beyond that, also anything that's just showing low movement. If you were to use a fitness device, for example, any kind of activity tracking device, it's going to show anything that is not elevating our heart rate, is not requiring several steps. We're not showing a lot of minutes of activity if we were to look at it on a fitness device. And this makes sense. Think about, again, our jobs. A lot of us are now sitting in front of a computer, even if when you started your career that wasn't the case. But beyond that, a lot of our leisure time activity is also focused around being in a sedentary position. We watch a lot of TV, we play on phones and iPads and things like that. My favorite example is that we will go to a sporting event. We pay a lot of money to go sit in the stands at a sporting event prior to the pandemic, and we sit while we watch other people be active, which is just such an American thing, right? So that's what sedentary behavior is defined as. We don't have to elevate our heart rate very much. We're not moving long distances. So think about that in terms of that 10,000 step rule that a lot of us know all about. We also know that we can't necessarily put a specific number on the amount of hours being seated every day constitutes prolonged sitting. We can't specifically say 9 hours is the cutoff point, for example, but there are some statistics that we do know. The first is that most of us age 15 and older in America are watching a lot of TV or doing a lot of other screen time outside of our work or school schedule. So the average, based on statistics back in 2018, was 2 hours and 46 minutes of screen time every day on top of whatever screen time you were gaining or using during your school day or during your work day. So if you add that all together, it's a considerable amount. In fact, it's about half of the amount of time that we spend awake during the day, which is just staggering. The middle statistic that you see is that adults report only 50% of us doing the minimum amount of physical activity per week that is recommended through the physical activity guidelines for Americans. So that would mean 150 minutes per week minimum of moving around at some sort of moderate intensity. Only 54% of adults are saying that they're doing that. Now, one thing I like to point out with this statistic is that it is based on self-reporting. So these are adults saying, yeah, I probably work out about 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week, which is 150 minutes. That's what we're reporting on. Now, if you look at the next statistic, only 25% of adults in America are saying that they're engaging in any type of physical activity in terms of it being a leisure thing that they like to do. So outside of their work or school recommendations or requirements, there's only 25% of us that are moving around in some sort of physical activity component in our leisure time. Look at the difference in those numbers. You can see 54% saying they're meeting the requirement, 25% saying that they're doing it through physical activity. So probably the number of us that are actually meeting that requirement is probably a lot less than 54%. Most things that you look at is usually between 1 in 3 and 1 in 4 adults are probably getting the recommended amount of physical activity per week. So how does being seated for long periods of time impact the body? Well, you can see them all listed over here on the right side of this figure on your screen. Simply put, the entire body is impacted by being inactive. We know that there are a lot of physiological processes that are affected by inactivity. And the first is right there at the top. We burn fewer calories. It makes us more likely to gain weight for that reason. We also lose muscle strength and endurance, and that's just because we're not using our muscles as much as we should. Because we're not moving around and putting that impact on our body, we see some bone weakening and we lose some mineral content because of that. And then also that lack of movement is impacting our metabolism. It makes it harder for our body to break down fats and sugars as it should. We also see some impact to our immune system, which I think Christina will talk a little bit more about in her diet section as well. We see a reduction in our body to properly circulate blood, and we also see some more inflammation. And then that last note there is hormonal imbalance. So when we take it back to the whole thought of the pandemic and what we've all been experiencing, if it's been stress or anxiety, maybe a little bit depression, that can also be heightened through a lack of movement. What about health risks? Well, we know that an inactive lifestyle can be one of the causes of many chronic conditions, and those are now listed on the left-hand side of this figure on your screen. And I won't read them all for you, but what we do know is that lack of activity is linked to all of these, but also lack of activity or sedentary lifestyle can also raise our risk for just premature death. So even if we don't have one of these underlying conditions, we can have premature death from our lack of activity as well. It increases our risk. Why is this? Well, the body is meant to move. Think about the human body. Go back to your high school biology class. We have bones. Bones give us a very rigid framework. They protect our internal organs, but they also support the body against the pull of gravity. Our large bones, especially in the lower body, think of your femur bone, it's holding up almost all of your body weight and allowing you to move around even while gravity is pushing you down. Bones also work together with muscles to form these simple mechanical levers throughout the body, and that produces body movement. So we've got, in addition to our bones and muscles, we've got ligaments and tendons, and they all are working together in this miraculous way to allow us to move not just upright, but in all different angles, and laying flat, crawling, climbing. We can do all this kind of stuff with our body, and our body was built to do so. Also, our nervous system is responding to stimuli, right? So we have the sensory input ability to get the stimulus and force our body to move. It's sending a signal to our muscles and causing them to contract. So we know that the human body is intended to move and move frequently. We don't tire quickly. Think of a sloth, for example. It's my daughter's favorite animal. They are not built for a lot of movement. The physiology in their body just simply is not meant to move. And we are so drastically different from them for a reason, for a biological reason. And what we're talking about here is really just the basics, but know that every system of the body is impacted by movement, and every system of the body performs better with movement. So let's look at a way to illustrate this. What you're looking at on the screen is basically illustrating that physical activity and not sitting are not the same thing. So what a lot of people have in their mind is, okay, I'm going to work my 9-hour workday sitting at a desk. Then I'm going to go to the gym for an hour. I'm going to work out really hard. And then I'm going to come home and I'll probably sit, eat my dinner, and watch TV for the rest of the night. And that's good. But that's not necessarily a counterbalance. So what we're going to look at with this illustration will hopefully explain that a little bit. What you should see is down on the axis along the bottom, that horizontal axis, that's indicating the amount of moderate to vigorous physical activity an individual engages in. And then if you look at the vertical axis, you'll notice that this is the daily amount of time seated throughout the course of a day, okay? The red represents a higher risk to your health. The green represents a lower risk to your health. And the orange and the yellow represent transitional decreases in that risk. So I'm going to try to pull up my little highlight here. Okay, hopefully you're seeing this laser pointer on your screen. So if we, okay, great, thank you. If you look down here at the bottom, at the very bottom left-hand corner of our illustration here, let's use this as an example. Let's say me, I sit a lot, okay? Let's say my desk job requires that I am seated at my desk for long periods of time. So I'm up here and I'm relatively physically active. Let's say I get 200 minutes per week physical activity in, right? I'm within that recommendation. You'll notice that as I move over into a lot of physical activity, I'm moving into this green area. So I'm reducing my risk, okay? Let's say that same person, okay, I'm sitting the majority of my day in an office, and I'm not really getting up and moving around too much throughout the course of my entire day. You'll notice that even with, moderate amounts of physical activity, let's say just below that 150-minute recommendation, I'm still really not in the green, right? The same can be said for another individual. Let's say I am someone that's up on my feet a lot. I'm a waitress, for example. I'm not really sitting a lot throughout the course of my workday. I'm down here. I'm doing pretty good with my sitting time, but I'm really inactive. I'm not engaging in any type of physical activity on any kind of regular basis. Notice that I'm still really not much better off in my health, right? Look at this transition from yellow to orange. You'll notice that if you're sitting a lot, you're going to require a lot of physical activity to get in the green. If you're not sitting a lot, you don't really need as much, but you need some in order to get into the green, okay? So it's a 1-2 punch. We need both reduction in our sitting and a good amount of physical activity throughout the week to stay in that green area. So I hope that was clear. What are the physical activity recommendations for Americans? Well, at baseline, it is 150 minutes per week of moderate intensity physical activity. If you're one of those people that really likes that vigorous stuff, you're a CrossFitter, for example, or something like that, your recommendation is going to be for 75 minutes per week of physical activity. The easiest way to think about this 150-minute recommendation is 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week. Now, this is the bottom, so we can certainly add on. The more that we add on, the better off we're going to be. The other recommendation is for at least 2 days a week of muscle strengthening activity. So this is your large muscle groups. You're wanting to do at least 8 to 12 repetitions for those muscle groups with different types of physical activity, whether it's weightlifting in a gym or doing large-scale movements, yard work, for example, playing with the kids, lifting them up and down. I have a 2-year-old. He's 35 pounds, and let me tell you, I'm probably doing a lot of muscle strengthening just from lifting him up and carrying him around. We do know that some physical activity is better than none. That's not even up for debate. That's something that science has proven tenfold. And we also know that even small amounts of physical activity add up. So let's say you don't necessarily have, 30 minutes at any given time throughout the day. That's okay. Even taking a couple flights of steps, 2-minute increments. Cut out the elevator if you can and go up the stairway. That might count towards your physical activity goal. How do you know you're performing that minimum of moderate intensity? Well, you can do that by performing the talk test. And what the talk test is again, you'll notice an increase in your heart rate, but you should be able to talk, not sing, okay? So you can carry on a conversation with the person next to you. Think about going on a brisk walk with a friend. You're talking the whole way, but you're probably getting a little bit winded if your conversation is pretty lengthy. The other option would be to do vigorous intensity. Again, that's going to be a significant increase in your heart rate. It's going to be difficult to carry on a conversation without pausing for a breath, okay? Moderate intensity activity examples for you would be, again, walking briskly, playing doubles tennis, maybe doing some line dancing, some yard work, doing some recreational swimming. If we were to take those same types of activities and increase the intensity to vigorous, then we would be running instead of walking. We would be doing singles tennis instead of doubles tennis. We might be doing hip hop dancing instead of line dancing, or shoveling snow instead of just doing yard work, or maybe swimming laps instead of doing recreational swimming. So hopefully you can see the difference there. The goal is to get to that 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week. And we can do that again through any increments of time that are good for you. So even if that means 5 minutes, 6 times a day, right? That's okay. What's the takeaway message? Well, the evidence is pretty clear. Physical activity fosters a lot of stuff for us. Normal growth and development for kids. For adults, it helps us to feel better, function better, sleep better, reduce our risk for lots of chronic diseases like we've talked about. And the health benefits start immediately after exercising, and they start even with brief episodes, short little periods of time. You're going to get benefit from them. Even better, research shows us that everyone gains benefits. So it doesn't matter your gender, your age, your race. It doesn't matter if you are living with a chronic condition or if you have a disability. Anybody is going to get benefit from movement. Again, the evidence is pretty well established. We know that our society now, we spend more time being seated for our leisure time. So it's really important to incorporate movement when and where you can. You want to remind yourself to get up and move around at least once every hour. That is Optima's recommendation. Once an hour, get up and move. If you need a reminder, you can certainly do that by setting a reminder on your smartphone or on your computer. And then your goal is to gradually increase your amounts of physical activity over a period of weeks to months. As opposed to putting this up here for the sake of time, we did send a link to Beth Ann. She could probably drop it in the chat box for you on our Move About booklet. It doesn't matter if you're Optima insured or not. I'm just sending you the link because it's going to give you some really good examples of how you can incorporate movement into your day at work, at home, or in your downtime, and gives you a little bit more of a robust information around this topic. I know we need to be sensitive about time today. Again, our goal is to get to that 150 minutes a week, stand up and move around at least once an hour. Those are the two takeaways for you from this point. So what I can do now is take any questions if we have any. I'm going to turn my webcam on here. Do we have any questions on this section?
We do not at this point.
Okay, great. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing again. I think we have, we're going to take a brief moment to get a message from our sponsor. Is that correct?
Thank you very much. So just quickly, again, great information. And we want to thank the Suffolk News Herald for being our media sponsor for this webinar series. If you've enjoyed these webinars or are looking forward to the webinars, we invite you to continue to participate with the Suffolk Education Foundation. On May 26th, we will be having our annual Gala for the Arts. And on October 29th, we will have our annual golf tournament. So we hope you will consider joining us for those. And we'll get to thanking some more of our sponsors at the conclusion of this evening. But this is such great information. I want to make sure we give you guys as much time as possible. So I guess do I need to make Christina the presenter now?
I think I can go ahead and hand it over to her.
Okay.
On my own. Let me just make sure. All right, Christina, you should be able to move that mouse here in just a second.
All right.
All right, you've got it.
Do I have it? Just
You've
want to make
got
sure
it.
I'm able to. Okay. Sometimes there's a little bit of a delay. Oh. Still not switching the slide, but just give it 1 second. Hi, everybody. Oh, there we go. All right. We got it. Let's see. Okay. So hi, everybody. I'm going to do the same and actually just say hello for a quick moment, then take my webcam off so we can focus on the information I'll be presenting on the slides and speaking with you about. So start now. So I'll be discussing how this last year with quarantine and the pandemic has impacted some of our mental well-being and how in turn that stress and some of that environment has affected our diet and our food choices. So it's no secret that the COVID-19 pandemic has led to changes in our lifestyle and mental well-being. And in turn, these changes have influenced our food choices and nutritional intake. I'm going to discuss how COVID has impacted our diets and tips on how to improve. To start, COVID has assuredly had an economic and financial impact on our shopping and eating habits. Especially at the beginning, we saw a dramatic reduction in availability of foods and other goods, with grocery store shelves literally emptying before our eyes. When COVID cases started to rise dramatically, and people began social distancing, many people stockpiled on food, became stressed, and felt uncertain about the future. We asked ourselves questions like, would the foods we eat normally be available? Will we be able to go to the grocery store and get the supplies that we need? Will we be able to afford enough food to feed our family? And what can we buy now in case we aren't able to buy it later? We then began to see not only a reduced availability of food on grocery store shelves, but on online shopping sites as well, which led to even more stockpiling. And overall shopping habits changed dramatically right off the bat. Then, as the economy and food supply chains became affected, there were even more changes in food availability. Throughout the pandemic, most companies, including food companies, were unable to generate the output that they did normally prior to the pandemic. Food production, processing, distribution, and demand were all impacted. For example, the pork industry lost 10 million hogs from April to September of last year. So over the course of a few months, this equated to a reduction in 2 billion pounds of pork, or an almost 10% reduction in normal production. And this led to higher prices for consumers, which ultimately could lead to food insecurity. Then, as jobs and working hours were cut, people began to have to budget more for grocery shopping and to feed their families, which led to more stress and further changes in shopping and eating habits. So, what were some specific changes in shopping habits that came about? A survey was conducted with about 2,000 people towards the beginning of the pandemic that assessed these changes. We found that on average, weekly trips to the grocery store went from 2.3 to 1 or less, with 3 out of 4 people reporting that they were making fewer trips. We also found that about 88% of people were unable to find items that they would normally buy, that 46% of people, or 1 in 2, were buying more in bulk than ever before, and that 3 out of 4 people were unable to find favorite brands or didn't even bother looking for their favorite brands and instead just bought whatever they could find. Grocery delivery increased by 350%, and meal delivery companies were getting about a 50% increase in business. We also found that the shopping environment itself created an added layer of stress beyond financial. Responses from that same survey showed that 60% of respondents were fearful to shop at the grocery store. 60% felt a sense of panic and anxiety when shopping, and about 1 in 5 people had witnessed a verbal altercation or argument while grocery store shopping. So on top of the stress about preparing for food, figuring out what you're going to buy, there was also these aspects of the environment that created stress just in themselves. And just as the pandemic had significant impacts on us financially and economically, it also had psychological impacts that affected our shopping and eating habits, and thus our health. We found that inadequate basic supplies led to stress, frustration, anxiety, and anger. And anxiety led and does lead to purchasing more packaged and ready-to-eat items rather than fresh items. We also know that eating more packaged and processed foods leads to weight gain, which in turn increases risk for chronic diseases. And stress overall can lead to stress eating for many. Sometimes this is coined emotional eating. We know that stress-driven eaters and drinkers are more likely to eat unhealthy foods and snacks like fast food, soda, and chocolate, and drink alcohol more frequently. Responses from the same survey gauged changes in eating habits and showed that about 1 in 2 people were eating more processed foods after the pandemic started and people were quarantining, and that about 20% were eating less processed foods, which is good, but we're seeing an unhealthy trend in this sense. We also found that about a third, a little bit over a third of people were eating less produce, while only about a fifth were eating more. People were eating less meat and poultry overall than those who were eating more. And about 1 in 2 people indicated that their eating habits and diet changed significantly during the pandemic. So with all of these ramifications, economic, financial, and psychological, we've seen a cumulative effect on overall health and well-being, not just in the short term, but in the long term, and particularly in regards to risk of chronic diseases. We know that stress and emotions like depression, anxiety, and hostility increase risk of heart disease. We also know that lack of exercise and physical activity, which we know has increased since the pandemic and quarantine, as well as poor nutritional intake, leads to weight gain, which can increase risk for chronic diseases. And this becomes especially important in this environment where we are spending more time at home and dealing with the stressors of what we've been experiencing, because the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, has established that people who suffer from underlying conditions like diabetes, heart conditions, and obesity are at higher risk for severe illness from COVID-19. So what does this mean? This means that if you have these conditions, you are more likely to be hospitalized or even die from contracting COVID-19. So during the pandemic, if you are exacerbating an already underlying condition or triggering the cascade of events that can lead to these types of underlying conditions like inflammation, high cholesterol, or an unbalanced weight, you are increasing the chance of onset for these diseases. So in this sense, eating a nutritious and balanced diet is a key way to ward off these conditions, which is especially important during and post-pandemic. In fact, scientists predict that we will see an increase in obesity and heart disease immediately after the end of the pandemic. So what is a balanced diet? I hope I've convinced you that it's important, not only for our quality of life, but especially during these times. So a balanced diet, what does it look like? Well, it's one that fulfills all of a person's nutritional needs. It consists of 6 main nutrient groups: proteins, carbohydrates, fats, vitamins, minerals, and water. With a balanced diet, most of your calories should come from whole grains, lean proteins, beans, nuts, fresh fruits, and vegetables. And here you can see a plate of what the quantities of those types of foods might look like when they're combined in a balanced meal. And another good rule of thumb is to make a goal to eat the rainbow, as the color of foods is often representative of their varying nutrient contents. So the more colors you see on your plate, the more likely you're getting a variety of nutrients in that meal. So this is often easier said than done. But I'd like to share some tips for you for healthy eating at home, which I think are fairly easy to implement, but can make a big difference in terms of your nutritional intake. So I'm going to go through 10 tips. And the first being, keep healthy snacks easily and readily accessible. So when you have healthy snacks, put them on that shelf in the fridge that's at eye level, or the shelf that's most convenient, or keep a bowl of fresh fruit or a healthy trail mix in the center of the counter so that when you are reaching for something, this is the easiest thing to grab. On the other side of the coin of that is make unhealthy snacks and treats less accessible. So keep those on a high shelf. If you buy soda and you have a spare fridge in the garage or another place you can store it, put those as far away as possible. I remember my dad always kept sugary drinks downstairs, which we had to actually go outside to go get. So that made us a little more likely to drink water and whatnot when I was younger, me and my siblings. And of course, better to not buy junk food at all. Obviously, if you don't have it, you can't eat it, but we all like our special treats sometimes. So you also want to pre-portion out snacks from larger packages. So especially as we are buying more in bulk in larger packages, since we are making fewer shopping trips, it is helpful to pre-portion out bigger bags into smaller bags. So if you buy a big bag of chips, pre-portion out all of the servings into smaller sandwich bags. That way, when you want to go get some chips, you aren't going to reach into what might seem like an endless bag of chips, and before you know it, finish the whole bag. You can also plan your snack and meal times. I know that Danny had mentioned using apps to track maybe how much you're moving. You can also use apps to track when you want to snack. You could keep a tally on the fridge if that was something that you wanted to do, but you can actually just set a timer or say, I'm going to have 3 snacks a day, and just being aware of your habits around it already will help facilitate healthy changes. And you also want to choose nutrient dense instead of calorie dense foods. So a food that is nutrient dense provides a high amount of nutrition, so high amounts of fiber, vitamins, and minerals, while a calorie dense food provides a lot of calories without a lot of nutrition. Typically, calorie dense foods are providing their energy from sugar and fat and not providing much more. When possible, choose nutrient dense foods for snacks like carrot sticks and sliced bell peppers or another vegetable with a low calorie dressing. You can also try air popped popcorn. Careful for the salt on top, maybe flavor it with some herbs, and you can eat a lot more popcorn than you can fried chips. Popcorn is a whole grain, that's a great snack as well. Also keep in mind that fiber and protein are great for helping you stay fuller longer or keeping you satiated. So once you eat a high protein or a high fiber snack, you're less likely to want to snack on more later or sooner. So those are all some good tips to keep in mind. For our last 5 tips, you also want to include a vegetable with every meal. With this advice, I've typically gone to eat a salad before you have your dinner, but we all know that fresh fruits and vegetables haven't always been as available as we might normally be used to. So including even a frozen vegetable with your meal. Frozen vegetables provide almost exactly the same amount of nutrition as a fresh vegetable, and they're going to be a lot more convenient in terms of storage and making sure that you can have them on hand. So including a vegetable with every meal, I like to recommend dark leafy greens. So spinach is a great choice and packed with nutrition. You also want to avoid boredom. If you feel bored, bring this awareness into your mind before autopiloting to the refrigerator. One thing that I like to do is just keep a simple list of activities I enjoy handy. So, and reference that list if I'm feeling bored. I like to listen to music or play music, an instrument if you play instruments. You can play with your pet if you have a pet, or go for a walk around the block, or write a thank you note to somebody you love or care about. Keeping a list of activities handy, a book that you can read a chapter of, that can help you avoid boredom and make up or be an alternative to just snacking mindlessly. Also, when you eat, just eat. If you aren't paying attention to what you're eating, you can often consume more calories than you intend because you aren't paying attention to your hunger cues. I didn't realize how full I was until I actually just got up from the couch and realized I ate a whole tub of ice cream. You also want to drink plenty of water. Just like there are apps to remind you of when to eat, you can also use apps for tracking water intake. There's extensions on your computer. If you happen to work on a computer during the day, you can use that as a reminder. Take a drink of water every hour. Maybe do that along with your movement. And then you also want to walk or try another form of exercise after eating. As Danny mentioned, movement is fantastic for your health, and it becomes especially important with eating as well, because exercise actually functions the same way that insulin might in your body, in that it helps to reduce high blood sugars after a meal. So if you or someone in your family struggles with diabetes, this can be an especially helpful habit to take on, because you'll naturally reduce blood sugars, and you also help maintain your calorie balance. Remember, calories in equals calories out. So the more you exercise, the more likely you're going to be able to maintain a balanced weight, and maybe lose weight if you need to. So particularly when it comes to managing stress, as we know, stress eating can lead to poor food choices. Here are a couple of tips for managing stress and its impact on nutrition and health. So one, you want to do the best that you can. Realize that there are an abundance of challenges that we are all facing and no one is perfect. So grace yourself with some understanding and do the best you can without getting too hard on yourself. It's important to be realistic, though ideally we would have a balance of fresh fruits and vegetables and whole grains and protein at every meal. This may not always be attainable all the time, especially during, a pandemic with food availability and whatnot. So release worry of what you cannot control and just do the best that you can. Also, keep a healthy pantry on hand with shelf-stable items. I'm going to go over a couple of items that I recommend keeping around in the next couple of slides. And also, just as it might be helpful to plan snacking, it can be helpful to plan your meals as well, or just keeping a list of meals that you could quickly make or plan for certain days of the week. Maybe every Monday it's pizza night. Maybe you switch off and try different ethnic foods on different days of the week, whether that be Chinese food or Indian food or Italian food. Or maybe on Thursdays, it's your partner's day to choose a meal. Making sure that you have some choices that you can quickly reference takes away from that daily pondering, oh my gosh, what am I gonna make tonight? You also want to cut down on foods like sugar, caffeine, and alcohol that can affect mood and also lead to higher levels of depression and anxiety. So you don't want to exacerbate a problem of being stressed by eating foods that are going to lead to emotions that make you even more stressed. And then lastly, you want to practice well-being, as we've been kind of mentioning throughout this entire presentation. So I have a quick exercise that you can do to manage stress snacking. So you can just go through 3 steps. When you feel like you want to reach for a snack in the refrigerator, go down the hall and grab whatever you have available. If you just take a moment to bring awareness to that feeling, you can change the whole outcome of this thought pattern. So you want to acknowledge your cravings and become aware of what you are feeling. And then just take 2 or 3 deep, slow breaths and ask yourself if you're actually hungry or just bored passing the time. And then recenter. Oftentimes, just bringing awareness to a feeling can help us change our whole thought pattern around it. So now I'm just going to go over a couple of pantry items that can be healthy options to keep in your pantry. So grains and pastas are great and obviously very shelf stable. A key reminder for this group of foods is that you always want to go for whole grain. So oatmeal is great for in the morning for breakfast and for cooking. It is a whole grain. Also, there are so many different grains that you may have not tried. While you might default to choosing white rice, you can also try things like bulgur or barley or brown rice. Farro is kind of a nuttier whole grain that I've tried recently this last year that I really enjoyed. So you can buy these dry and prepare them at home in large quantities and save some for the next day. And they're great to keep on hand and healthy choices. Also beans, peas, and lentils. You can buy them dried or canned. And specifically when you buy them dried as the dried bean, it's so affordable. It's really a cheap option for a food that is high in fiber and also provides a lot of protein. So beans, peas, and lentils are great to cook with and keep in the pantry. For canned vegetables and fruit, you want to choose low or no sodium options for canned vegetables, and you want to choose fruit packed in its own juice. For fats and proteins, it's good to keep healthy oils on hand, nuts and seeds, and nut butters. But keep in mind, because these have fats, they can go rancid. So you want to keep them in a cool and dark place, which hopefully your pantry is. Also, canned fish is a great choice to keep in the pantry, whether that be tuna, sardines. These fish actually provide omega-3, and omega-3 is an essential fatty acid that a lot of people lack in their diet. It helps to combat inflammation and in kids supports brain health and whatnot. So having a source of omega-3 is especially important, and fish is one of the best places to get it, and it's not easy to have fresh fish on hand, so canned fish is a great option. As I've mentioned, trail mix, dried fruits, granola, and energy bars are great, especially if you're going for a hike or a walk or to the park or the beach. And baking ingredients and spices. And then for the freezer and the fridge, Keeping frozen vegetables and fruit is probably the best option when you aren't making frequent trips to the store. You might not be aware, but you can easily freeze fresh vegetables that you buy, even spinach, for example. If you buy the big package of fresh spinach and you realize, well, it's been 3 days and now it's going to go bad and I don't want to waste it, you can actually just put a handful of that fresh spinach in a Ziploc bag, make sure all the air is gone, and then put it in your freezer and you have a serving of spinach right there, and it freezes. And probably, I haven't done a taste test, but I would think might taste better than the frozen spinach that you buy from the grocery store. And then bread and tortillas are super easy to freeze. Leftovers are a great go-to, especially if you're trying to reduce any stress around preparing food. And then having long-lasting produce, potatoes, sweet potatoes, root vegetables, lemons, limes, especially with the seasons changing and being right around the corner, this is something that might improve. We're going to have some farm stands and farmers coming up with, you know, springtime and summer. You can maybe just go out into your community and support a local farmer to get some of this delicious produce that we have available in our neighborhoods. So that will be an option as we move through these next couple of months. Tofu and tempeh is a great food to have on hand. It's a high protein, low calorie, high calcium food source and stays in the fridge, stays good in the fridge for a long time, as do most dairy products and eggs. And then just also having some sauces and other flavorings. And for the last point, I'm just gonna go over a quick and nutritious pantry meal. So this requires 4 to 5 ingredients. You can just take a can of any beans that you like with a can of fire roasted tomatoes, combine those in a pan with a little bit of olive oil, throw in frozen spinach or another vegetable that you like and saute that up and serve it over a grain of your choice. Now, this snack or meal is nutrition packed. Not only do you have balanced nutritional intake from protein, fat, and carbohydrates, you're also getting about 50% of your vitamin A requirements, 50% of your fiber requirements, 20% of calcium, 30% of iron. So even if you don't eat healthy for the rest of the day, including a really nutrition packed meal like this is going to help round out your overall nutrition. So that's all that I have to share for that section, and I'm going to pass this back to Danny to wrap up our presentation with goal setting.
Thanks, Christina. And again, I know that Bethann, I think, has some links again to some support documents and resources for you if you are interested in taking a deeper dive into a lot of the stuff that Christina just mentioned. So I know we are running short on time, so I'm going to be sensitive to the time and go ahead and move on. And then if we have questions, we'll go ahead and take them at the end. So this is our last section on goal setting. And this is really just intended to help you build out some goals, whether it be around diet or physical activity or reducing your sitting time or any other aspect of well-being that we've kind of mentioned. Hopefully this will be a tool that'll help you build some goals out that are going to be more robust for you. So what we know is if you take a deeper dive into health behavior and theories around how to change your behavior, you learn a lot about barriers that make it difficult to change behaviors, right? So around diet, around exercise, anything. I mean, sleep, your finances, anything that you set in front of you, those barriers make it difficult. What research has shown us is that setting goals through certain strategies allow us to make them more attainable. And those two strategies you're seeing on your screen. The first is the type of goal and then the action plan for that goal. So we're going to talk through a little bit about these. First, the type of goal really boils down to, is the goal going to be an approach goal or an avoidance goal? And they are exactly what they sound like. So if you're moving toward a more desirable type of behavior, then that's an approach goal. If you're moving away from something that's less desirable or undesirable behavior, then that would be an avoidance goal. So here's an example. Let's say our overall goal is to start eating better. If we use an approach goal, that might mean adding more fruits and vegetables into our diet, exactly like Christina was just talking about. This would move us toward a more desirable way of eating. Let's take that same goal and we're going to use a goal type of an avoidance goal, and that's going to be to stop eating as much fast food. Okay, so in that type of goal, we're moving away from a more or a less desirable way of eating. Although you can use either one of these, studies show that approach goals are usually associated with greater positive thoughts, greater emotions. We tend to feel more motivated. We tend to feel more confident in our ability to obtain that goal. So that's something to consider. When you're putting a goal out in front of you, are you trying to move towards something better or trying to move away from something that's maybe not as good for you? And that might help from starting at the baseline of what you want to do. So now that we've talked about the type of goal, let's talk about the action plan. And the action plans basically are answering the questions of where, when, and how a goal is going to be implemented. Action plans should be pretty short in time. They need to provide you with feedback on whether or not it's the appropriate avenue for you to achieve a goal. And that way it can be easily modified. So something like, I'm going to start eating more fruits and vegetables, our same example from before. How? Okay, well, I'm going to start adding a vegetable to every meal of the day, exactly like one of the tips Christina mentioned in the previous section. So that would be a way you could build that out. So if you have pen and paper, you can grab it now. If not, the link for this last section does contain the acronym I'm going to go over. So when Beth Ann sends that link out, you can access this acronym, how to set goals, and that is to be SMART. So let's use the example on the screen of I will start exercising more, okay? We just talked about the recommendation is for 150 minutes per week of physical activity. Let's say that historically we've not been very physically active on any type of routine basis. So 150 minutes a week, that's going to be pretty tough for us out the gate. So maybe what we could do to start off is to be a little bit more specific in a way that makes sense for us, okay? Maybe we'll start out by exercising 1 hour every week. We've defined it by giving us a clear understanding of what we're aiming for. We've set that in there, 1 hour every week. So we know how we're going to do, or excuse me, when we're going to do it. We're going to do it every week. We're going to do it for an hour. Next, we want to be measurable. So we want to have an objective way to track our progress. So in this example, that might mean tracking our minutes of activity on a fitness device. So like a Fitbit or something like that. If you don't have that, you certainly can just do a log on pen and paper, or you can use an app on your phone or online, MyFitnessPal, for example, anything that you can log your progress, and that way you can make sure that you're working towards that goal. Next, we want the goal to be achievable. So this means we want to make it difficult versus easy, okay? But we also want to make it something that is just out of reach. So when we think back to those goal types, again, we had the approach goals and the avoidance goals. Maybe we make this achievable by making it an approach goal that's just a little bit outside of what we can do, okay? So maybe I know that 1 hour every week is going to be tough for me. So the way that I can just get over that hump and just grab it when it's just out of reach is to bring in a friend and to commit to doing a group exercise class every week. Maybe we sit on a Zoom call together and do the class together. And that way I've got some accountability. Next, we want it to be realistic. Okay, so if we have a really long-term goal, that might mean breaking it up into short-term ones that are going to be more readily achievable, and that's going to keep us motivated. So remember, we talked about our goal originally was to get to 150 minutes of exercise per week. So in order to get to that long-term goal, maybe we'll add 30 minutes on every 2 weeks. So we continue to move up the chain and move up in our total amount of time that we're moving around every week. And last, we want to be time-bound. And this means that we're going to set start and end dates for ourselves, and that we can adjust it if we need to. But you'll see in our example here, if we continue to add on 30-minute increments every 2 weeks, we will get to 150 minutes of exercise per week within 8 weeks. So we've basically set ourselves an 8-week goal. If we look at the original goal compared to our now SMART goal, we've got so much more detail, so much more specificity. We've answered so many questions about how, when, and where we're going to do this. And so we've built in some bumpers for ourselves. So if we find ourselves getting off track, we know how we can get ourselves back on track. So I know that was quick, but we're past 7:30, so I wanted to be sensitive to that. We are going to go ahead and move into questions. And if you have any, go ahead and start sending those in. That would be great. While we're getting any questions coming in, I did want to show, this is the Optima Health website. It's called My Life, My Plan. And if you can go to optimahealth.com/mylifemyplan, all of the resources that we send individual links on will take you to this overall page. This is free of charge. Any information that's on here, you're welcome to it. You do not have to be an Optima member to utilize it. It's just a great resource, and we've got some more in-depth information around these topics that you are certainly welcome to look at any time. So that's our spiel. If you want us to go ahead and take some questions, we're ready for them, I think.
Danny, while we're waiting for people to give us some questions, I'm going to take back control real quick and just show a quick video that our College and Career Academy that teaches culinary arts does. They did apple nachos, which I think it sounds delicious and certainly looked delicious when I watched the video earlier. So we'll watch this and then we'll come back to your Q&A.
Sounds good.
Let's make nachos, but with fruit. Let's see what you need to get started. I would pause here so that you can see the recipe. Let's get started on the Greek yogurt and peanut butter spread. So I started with Greek yogurt, peanut butter, maple syrup, and then a little sprinkle of cinnamon. You can do with or without it. Then I like to mix it all together until it's fully combined and really fluffy. Like this. I like to put mine inside of a piping bag. Alright, now it's time to cut up some fruit. So I have some strawberries, and you can slice them any which way that you'd like. I'm going to keep my area clean, and now I'm done with those. Now it's time for the kiwi. I cut both ends, and then I take the skin off little by little. And then I just dice it in a small dice. Super easy. I've washed all my fruit, and I have it all together. So now it's time to cut the apple. I like to leave this last because I don't want it to oxidize or turn brown. But if you're worried about that, you can put it in some water with lemon, and you can actually cut these ahead of time. This is the easiest way for me to take all of the core out at the same time while keeping all of my apples the same shape. So now I'm just going and layering all of my apples, doing a little bit of Granny Smith, a little bit of Honeycrisp, and overlapping them. I'm now adding my strawberries, my kiwi, and some blueberries. Look how pretty. Now I like to add my peanut butter yogurt spread, and I like to put a little bit of granola on top. And come on, who doesn't want to eat this? These are amazing, and I hope that you like this recipe. If you try this, make sure you tag us at CCAP Culinary Arts. Thank you so much. Bye.
So I think that definitely hit all the points that you guys mentioned in your all's presentation tonight.
Absolutely. They look delicious too.
So I just wanted to, this is actually a question for me. So you guys talked about a lot of things, but one of the things that I think gets overlooked, especially with kind of the nonstop screen time, but is the importance of sleep and nutrition and mental health and handling all those underlying causes. Can you guys talk to that at all?
Well, I'll let Christina chime in too, but I think for me, the big takeaway when it comes to so many aspects of prevention, which is, you know, the department that we work in is all about how do you prevent yourself from having a chronic disease, or if you have one, how do you prevent it from getting worse? And so the example I like to use to answer that type of question is, if you treat yourself, think about your kids, right? If you treat your body the way that you treat your kid's body in all of those aspects, we would probably do ourselves a lot of good, right? When it comes to sleep, what do we typically do with toddlers or young kids? We give them a set time that they need to go to bed. When they seem overtired, we put them to bed. We don't let them have a lot of sugary food before they go to sleep. We try to make sure they stay hydrated, that they are getting all of their fruits and vegetables in. We want to let them get their energy out. They're going to sleep better at night.
Their screen time too.
Yes, we reduce their screen time. Now, I have 2 kids. I'll tell you, there's days that they definitely have more screen time than they should. But in general, we have all of these really good intentions for our kids when it comes to how do we prevent them from having long-term lifestyle habits. I'm sure that's something that we all think about in one way or another. So if we take those same type of concepts and we apply them to ourselves, we would probably do a lot better at keeping ourselves in a healthy state as opposed to being reactive when we get not that great news from a doctor. So that would be my kind of simple message on that. But Christina, if you want to elaborate at all.
I actually love what you said. I think that that's a great way to kind of put it. With eating, I agree that eating too late at night sometimes doesn't have the best effect on sleep patterns. And I think that having a routine, just kind of like around pre-planning meals, pre-planning snacks, sticking to a routine when you go to bed, making sure that you have less screen time, and kind of sticking by just kind of those simple rules can really help. But easier said than done sometimes.
That's true. My dad has a saying that he has said my whole life, and it's the only way that you can eat an elephant is one bite at a time. And basically the gist of that is you cannot address all aspects of your well-being at once, right? There are going to be days or times in your life that one really has to take more focus than the other. But if you start to embed some simple rules into your routine, they just become second nature. So even if your takeaway from the presentation today is, I've got to stand up more, or I've got to put more fruits and vegetables into my diet, even if it's one takeaway, take it and run with it, let it become routine, and then, add from there.
I don't know that we have any other questions. Beth Ann, are there any that you're aware of? Okay.
She might be muted.
Well, I think that's our presentation for this evening. Again, our next 2 sessions are actually on mental health, which go to that wheel that you guys were talking about. So we hope we get more people to join us for that and find value. Thank you to a few more of our sponsors, the UPS Store and the Ruralton's Club. And please continue to watch SuffolkEducationFoundation.org for more information, and please support us at SuffolkEducationFoundation.org. Thank you all very much. Bye. And have a great evening.
Bye. Have a great night.
Bye-bye.